Hi y'all, I'm Lindsay Kelly. I'm a third-year scenic design grad and the former props master for the department. I actually have a couple tricks up my sleeve, especially because I have to do so much food like we did for All Wilderness. We've done food for, we did some for Oristaya, or at least it was in development. So I've got a few tricks up my sleeve because essentially food is not ideal on stage. Right? Stagehands have other things to worry about than food prep, and sometimes food props can get a little messy or unsafe for consumption for the actors. So one thing that I always talk to the director about before I get started is actually if food can be fake. So one of my tricks to avoid spillages or to avoid drinks that maybe just need to sit on a table and look pretty and not actually have to be like drinks, or maybe it's even mimed. But anything for fake drinks, I have two solutions. So let me show you. Essentially what I'm going to be doing is taking a glass. So today we're going to make a martini. Shaken, actually mostly just stirred. So there are two different options that you can do for a clear liquid. And the first one was the one I actually learned on doing. And it's something called quick water. You can find this at Michael's or at any floral store. Essentially, it's going to turn into like this thick, clear gel. It's pretty wonderful. If you look in floral arrangements and you see fake water that looks really real, that's what this is. And so it's more of a gel. One of the cons about this gel, as opposed to what I'm about to show you, is that dust sticks to it. It looks a lot more real because it's a gel as opposed to something solid, but dust does stick to it, and you can't really wipe it off and clean it well, so it doesn't super store well. So it's not ideal, but it does come up with a beautiful product. The next is what I use pretty much all the time, and it's Amazing Clear Cast, or it's a resin type base. And essentially this, you've probably seen it, you can find it in Hobby Lobby, you can find it at Michael's, pretty much any craft store. And this comes out with just this nice clear thing. It also usually comes with dyes. Like the quick water doesn't really come with any sort of dyes, so you can't change the color. But say I'm working on a pina colada, and I want it to be a fake pina colada, or I want it to be fake whiskey, or I want it to be, I did it for stew once, doing like a giant thing of stew. So this, the positive part about this is that you can buy resin dyes at like Hobby Lobby or Michael's or online and actually color this so it can be all sorts of different liquids. The quick water, you're kind of just stuck to using it for vodka and water or gin or other clear drinks. This one, you can color, so it's a little more flexible. I tend to keep this around my shop just because for that flexibility. So we're actually going to do 2 samples today. We're going to make our martini, and then we're going to make a vodka shot. Right? So that I can show you these 2 different substances and how they react. Alright, let's get started. Alright, any good props master will tell you it's not about the actual thing, it's about the dressing. We are essentially fooling the eye into thinking that there's something there. So yeah, there can be liquid, but what makes it a martini is that little bit of dressing. So I personally like my martinis with olives. So what I've done here is I've actually made an olive that I'm going to put and suspend in the liquid to give it that little bit of extra dressing to make it a little more deceptive to the eye. So how I do this, essentially you can use all sorts of clay. You can paint the clay, but the easiest thing I've found to do, and I do keep it around because I make a lot of fake martinis, is just like Sculpey clay that you can find in the specific colors. Get as close to like specificity. If you have a lime green olive, no one's gonna believe it. But if you can find like a good olive green and pimento red, that's gonna be a lot more believable from far away. Especially because you just don't, it needs to look real. Just take the time and do the color matching. So I took this, and I'm gonna go ahead, I'm not gonna show you, but I just made these little olives that you can see. Essentially I just made a ball, pulled it out, and then added some red accents and stuck a toothpick through it. Super easy. Now, this is oven baked, so I could bake this, but considering that I'm gonna actually suspend this in a hard liquid, I don't really need to. But if you're gonna have like one sitting on top or one like halfway suspended, I would really advise that you bake them. I really hate sticky, unfinished clay. It, 1, just shows laziness, and 2, it never keeps. So we want something that's keep so we can use it over and over again, because we're not made of money. So you just need your pimento red and your green. Make you some olives. I've made a couple here, and then just stuck them through with my toothpicks, or you can have one of those fancy metal toothpicks. Dress it up. I just had these at the house. So, now that I'm going to take my resin. Now, the most important thing about working with resin is following the directions. Not everything is going to have the same makeup, especially if you end up working with smooth-on products. Sometimes it's a 2-to-1 ratio, sometimes it's a 1-to-1 ratio. Generally, these resins are going to be 1-to-1, but you never, ever want to work with resin or anything that's expensive and casts hard until you check out that ratio. So, I want this to be, I'm going to use this for the martini. So I want this olive to suspend. So what I'm not actually going to do is make a huge batch of this and then like pour it all in at once, because my olive would actually just sit in the bottom like this. I kind of want it to feel like it's floating a little, like it would like actually in vodka instead of being super heavy foam. So I am going to video this and show what it's like to mix this resin. Alright, so same thing. Got my disposable cup. I've got my quick water, part A. And since I'm doing a shot, this is a big shot. It's actually a candle holder. One, this is just what I found at Michael's today. But two, sometimes I like exaggerating the size of things, especially for far away shows. It emphasizes what, especially as something small as this is with clear liquid, it kind of emphasizes what it is. So if I'm up close and I do this, that looks ridiculous. But if I'm far away and I see something about this size, it's quite obvious that, oh, hey, that's a shot of vodka. But it's a little easier to see. So sometimes I will exaggerate the size of things for shows that are farther away. So same idea, never, ever mix into your actual glass that you're using. And it's always better to mix too much than not mix enough. Sometimes waste sucks and this stuff is expensive, but what also is terrible is if you use all this, and especially if you color it like resin and you can't get that color exactly right, you've got striations and that just looks hella weird. So I've got my part B. I'm gonna punch a hole. Now I'm gonna go, once again, this is a 1-to-1, so I need to be pretty exact with what I'm using. So I'm gonna go all the way to the top like I did on the last one. Alright. And don't just dump it, because once again you'll get uneven. You really need to scrape everything out to make sure you're getting all that expensive resin, and two, that way you know your everything's even. And we're gonna mix. So with the water, the acrylic tends to, the bubbles tend to rise to the top. Since this is a very thick, viscous gel, you really don't, you want to blend it, but you don't want to like stir quickly. It'll introduce air. So really just take your time, kind of fold it in. And then we can do that trick I showed you at the end of the resin where you tap it. And that actually releases or makes a bunch of the air bubbles go to the top. So I'm gonna make sure you're stirring very, very well. because if this isn't fully like blended, then you'll end up with some weird sticky crap that is not fake water. You'll end up with sticky, and it's happened to me before. I once let some students work with resin and they never had before, and so they were just kind of pouring things in as it felt right, and I looked over and I caught them doing it, and I was like, what are you doing? And so we had to figure out how to adapt. You can still find those sticky things in the prop storage. So 1-to-1 ratio, guys, very important. So, but also you can't just take too long stirring this. So this, the water, which I'm gonna already try. This gel only takes like 3 minutes to set, or 8 hours to cure, but like 5 minutes to set. So you're gonna pour high in a thin ribbon right in the center, because what this does is this actually gets rid of a lot of big air bubbles. And so every bit of that. Alright, so if you get some runoff like this, don't leave that there. Grab yourself. That just looks sloppy to me. That gives it away that it's fake. So grab just a little paper towel. Either put some water on it, but just wipe that off. Like, it seems like such a little thing, but especially if you're in close quarters, that little thing makes all the difference in like that suspension of disbelief. And really sells your product. And so I'm just gonna wipe that all the way around. And I'm gonna put this, I'm gonna give it a few taps to start making those bubbles come up. And I'm gonna put this on a more flat surface than my drafting desk. All right, let's check back in with those in an hour and see how they turn out. Well, stirred, not shaken, I guess. So one of the fun facts about this is it takes about 8 hours, so I've left this overnight. I have obviously changed it as a whole new day. But yeah, it's pretty wonderful to make the olive float a little bit, to give it a little dimension. I took some tape and taped it against the wall and then let that sit. So that's how the martini turned out. Our shot glass, which was the acrylic water, the floral water, this didn't turn out so well. It's a lot more viscous when you're stirring it, and so it's a lot more likely to trap bubbles and air if you're really not careful, which it turns out looks like I wasn't. And so it's got its benefits. It's kind of a hard, squishy gel, which is really fun, but it does get sticky, so it will attract dust, but you can wipe that off, which is kind of why I tend to just prefer this really hard, really lovely acrylic. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed learning how to make fake drinks. This is some of the tips and some of those common practices that I use as a craft master. I hope you really enjoy it. Happy finals week, and if you're graduating, happy graduation.